Okay, so what I wanted to do is make a class for new people today, and so I hope I do an okay job. That's what I'm hoping. I don't know. We'll see. Uh, so I guess I want to present Christianity. What is it? What is Christianity? And I guess I wanted to start by saying that it was first called the Way. When Jesus taught, he came in so different, and they were still celebrating Jewish rituals. But his understanding of the tradition and of the religion was so different that they started calling it the way. And what I think is missing in the world right now and in Christianity, I just got done speaking with a person who's leaving the Catholic faith. And that's okay with me. I don't care that they're leaving the Catholic faith. But the reason he's leaving is because he's looking for a deeper spirituality. And when I got talking to him about what Christianity is and what the faith is, he had no idea. And that, I think, is the great tragedy of religion right now. It seems to me, Catholicism, they know the way to produce a saint. They can consistently produce saints in each generation. They've never not produced them since Jesus taught. Jesus taught his disciples how to become saints. The saints taught disciples how to become saints. And all the way to today, that's been preserved in the monasteries and convents mostly. So it broke my heart to hear a guy say he's leaving. And he said, I'm going to do a bunch of psychedelics. He said, I'm just going on a spiritual journey. And I didn't judge it. I didn't want to pick on that. But it broke my heart because he didn't know any of the stages of spirituality that Jesus taught. He didn't know how to begin a deep. He was been a Catholic for years. He didn't know, and I think that is beyond tragic. It is. It breaks my. I've literally shed tears about that. That people don't know what Christianity is. They know what the religion is, but they don't know what the spiritual path is. And that, I think that is a tragedy. It's difficult to state what a deep tragedy that is. And I hope to have another conversation with this guy. I really like this guy. Actually, I love him. But he just seems not open, and I don't know how to reach him. But he should have already been reached with all of this. He should have already known it. He was taught in Catholic school the names and dates and of popes and when this happened and when that happened. He came out of Catholic school with an intellectual understanding of the faith, but they did not teach him the way. They didn't teach him the way. So I thought I would start, this is for him to some degree and other new people. I thought I would start by saying it was first called a way, just the way. Because Jesus was on the planet and he's fully human and he's fully God. And he knows, you have to think about what that would mean. You've become a human, but you made humans up. You have to think if you made up humans, you probably know a lot about them. You probably know a lot about them. So he's on the planet saying, I know the way to free you from suffering. I know the way. And I'm going, eventually he shows them that he is the way. But what does it mean that he is the way? What does that mean? It means that in Christ is a fully human being, just like me and you, who is at the end for which God designed humanity. He is at the end. So God made humans for a reason. They have a reason for existing. And they have a purpose. And we've talked about the purpose. It's not even a joke to say their purpose is to be ridiculously in love with all of creation. That's their job. My dad gave me jobs. It wasn't like that. My dad was kind of, I love my dad. I love my dad. I love dad. He's dead now. I love you, man. My dad's job, I don't know. I don't feel like he got me up when he said, get up, boy. And I'm already in trouble, scared already, and he put me to work outside. I don't think he saw my job as to be ridiculously in love with kittens and trees and stuff. He had a different job in mind. So here's Jesus on the planet. He knows what we're for. He made us for a reason. And the reason is profoundly spiritual and profoundly mystical, which I've said a million times. To be so in love with God that you're one with God, that you participate and share in God's consciousness, God's love, and God's being. And through that relationship of profound love and sharing of each other, so that Christianity literally says that we become deified, that we don't become gods, but we become God by participation in God's energies. This is what he taught. That's our role. So then we're one with God through God's energies, which means we're loving with God's love. We're conscious of one another with God's consciousness. It's knowledge, but it's higher than knowledge. It's consciousness. And we profoundly are. And then, so we're one with the angels. We're one with heaven. We're one with God now in this life. This is what God made us to be. And then, so we're in love with all the heavenly upper spheres, but we're also profoundly in love with rocks and dirt and trees and rivers and animals. And so here's humanity's vocation. They call it a vocation. Here's humanity's vocation: to unify all of the created realm with heaven through our love. So that's Jesus on the planet, in Jerusalem, saying, hey, I am the way. And Jesus is doing that. Jesus is already fully in that state of consciousness. He's already unifying all of the heavenly spheres, the Trinity, with creation. He's doing it. And he has power. He can heal. He can walk on water. He has the full powers meant for humanity to have when we wouldn't kill each other with them by hating each other. Somebody cuts you off on the road and then they die. You don't want that. So, okay, we have no power because we're so fallen from love. We're so far away from it. We have no power. And Jesus sees that. Jesus sees our suffering. God, the Trinity, sees our suffering and says, man, they need help to come back to what I made them to be. They need help. And there's, theologians talk about the billions of ways God could have done it. It's not like it had to look the way it looked. It didn't have to be Jesus. It could have been any old thing. But here is how God did it. God said, I will become a human being. I will take on their plight. I will take on their suffering on me. And I will share with them a way to come back into their vocation, to come back to what they are designed to be. And right now, they're so convinced that they have to be perfect before they can know me, that they're cutting themselves off from my light. So I'll bring a way to them that is not based on works, that's not based on their worthiness, not how well they're functioning, but that is based on my love for them. My love for them. A way based on grace instead of work. So here's Jesus on the planet. That's what he's here to do. He knows what people are for. He knows what they're for. He knows the bliss and the love and the joy and the intimacy they're designed to have with creatures, right? With trees, with little puppies, squirrels. He knows. He knows. That's what the way was. That's what it was. And it still is that way. Every generation, there's nuns and monks who attain that full state. I was going to read a quote about it, but I've done it too much. I'll read other quotes tonight. If you guys remember, I always read the quote about that monk who talks about how on the way to love, he fell in love with everything, spiders, snakes, everything. And at the end of his love, he was cosmically conscious of the whole universe being held in that love. That is Christian spirituality. And it's not fringe. I quote out of this book a lot. It's the Russian theological book. No one thinks that book is fringe. That book is orthodox. It is considered already, even though it's recently written, just maybe 50 years or 60 years, a classic of Christian literature. And he's telling us what? He's saying, in this book, he's saying, the whole of Christian life is to participate in the energies that God is radiating onto creation all the time. The energies. Light after light after light. Absorbing God's energies. Prayer is absorbing God's energies. I've been amazed how dogmatic Christians can be. When my channel, a couple of videos I made had a ton of views. I can't tell you why. There's no production value. So I guess when they get views, the content might be good because they sometimes get a few, 2,000 views or something. And then come in the critics. And what I saw coming for sure was maybe New Age people picking on me about stuff because I used to be in the New Age and I'm not. And I thought that might ruffle feathers. No, that's not been it. It's been Christians who don't like that I use the word energy, even though it is everywhere in Christian literature. They didn't like the tree behind me. It looks New Age. It's Jewish. And also, who cares who painted it if it's beautiful? Really? Really? That tree's going to bug someone. That's enough to make someone afraid. How dogmatic must you be to even think that way? Paul goes into the marketplace in Acts. He buys meat in the marketplace to eat. He's enjoying it. And the same kind of people that are worried about my tree, my Jewish tree, but it's New Age, those same kind of people come up and say, why are you eating meat? Don't you know that meat was sacrificed to pagan idols in pagan rituals? And his basic answer is, hey man, if you're weak in your faith and it bothers you, don't eat. I am with Christ. Therefore, it's clean to me. It's clean to me. This is funny, I shouldn't say it, but I want to set some of these people up and say I was wandering in the forest, I came upon these witches, they were naked, they were dancing around a fire, and they sacrificed this chicken, and I happened to be watching, and then they noticed I was watching, and they said, oh, it's okay, come on, just come eat with us. And I ate some chicken. I know what those people would do. They would go ballistic. Those dogmatic people would lose their mind. Until I brought up Paul, and then they wouldn't know what to do. So Christianity was a way. It's a way to God. And then as that way crystallizes, and especially as it becomes really popular, the first 300 years was Christians who were in danger for being Christian. So the first 300 years is often considered a really high point of power within the Christian religion because you didn't get anyone in there for like connection socially. You didn't get anyone being Christian for, hey, if I can, meet a lot of people, that I'll get better business opportunities. You didn't get people who were Christian because being Christian meant you were something special and important. It would give you social status. First 300 years of Christianity, you had people who were Christian because they believed it, because it was profound for them. They were experiencing it deeply, and it was dangerous to even be Christian. So that first 300 years, it's part of the apostolic age. And it actually goes on to like 5 or 600 AD, but in a very solid, powerful way. But that first 300 years, it was dangerous to be Christian, and it produced incredible literature. People don't know that the saints of Christianity wrote commentaries on the Bible. They wrote commentaries on what the scriptures mean. There was relationship. There was disciple-student relationship. Jesus taught his disciples. I don't remember what book it in. It might be the Didache. I don't know which one it is, but I was reading about it, and they were talking about it. One of the disciples was coming to town. And just the fact that he was coming to town filled them with profound awe and reverence, because these guys would come in with such great power that it was, frankly, slightly frightening, but in a good way. This is the kind of power that was present in Christianity. And those guys were coming in and they were teaching. They weren't reading the Bible. Do you want to know why? It wasn't written yet. Like, it starts with letters and gospels, and it all gets written, but it's them directly teaching. And they're teaching people how to become saints like them. And they're teaching many, and they're commenting on, they're not just saying what Jesus said, they're saying what he meant by saying it. And that community begins to grow until there's thousands and thousands of people, all who are participating in this deep Christian way, this deep spiritual way. And it's vibrant and powerful. And that the enlightenment that Jesus had is being transmitted from person to person to person. And it grows. And by 300 AD, they've got all kinds of letters, a few gospels, 4 gospels, from disciples embedded in a vast community of people who are directly connected, if not to the disciples, right? 300 AD is a ways away, so it gets down. But everyone there has been personally instructed at 300 AD. Everyone has been personally instructed in the way. And that means they're spending 2 or 3 hours a day in prayer, which we now would call in secular terms meditation. But they called it prayer. So when you read in the Bible, where in the Bible does it say to meditate? You'll hear Christians say that. Oh, they called it all prayer back then, and there were stages of prayer. 3 hours a day in prayer, 4 hours a day in prayer. Peter's on the roof in Acts. He falls into a trance, has a vision. No one freaks out he was in a trance. No one says, oh no, you're in a trance, you might get a demon. It's common. It's so common they didn't even explain it. So common, it's just part of the thing. So they're spending all this time in prayer. They're hitting very profound states of consciousness, like that monk who became one with the universe through love. Right? They're having deep intimacies with, that's Christian spirituality. That's Christian spirituality. That's what it is. And when Rome they didn't make Christianity the state religion. I've said that they did, but it turns out it's more nuanced. They just preferred it and emboldened it. And then all of a sudden, you had way more people that were Christian then you had saints to teach them. And I believe that is where the dual culture within Christianity set in and became permanent. It's just my theory. That's what I think. I think that's when it happened. When now you have saints who are instructing people how to become saints, heal, work miracles, right? Like the real thing. But now you've got way more people being Christian than you have saints to teach them. And tons of those people are there for, social standing, meeting business people that have good business deals. So now all of a sudden the dual culture comes in of lukewarm Christianity and serious Christianity. And from then till today, you've got both of those cultures that still exist to this day. There's monasteries and convents, and then obviously some priests and lay people who are extremely holy, who take the system seriously and use it the way Jesus taught. And then there's that other culture that's, I guess, nominally Christian. And there's where the dogma and the what I think is there. Now you're not touched, you're not touched deeply by the power. You're not, those people that are like that, they're proud to be Christian because some of them think it makes them better than other people. And if they're not being taught the path of Christianity, the path of spirituality that grows in you, that frankly levels your ego. I mean, or you hope it does, right? It's leveling your ego. We hope we're having our ego leveled. We hope we're having our ego reduced. We hope we're having our ego ground into powder. But then you get all these Christians that are not doing that. And this has nothing to do with Christianity. Well, it does, but I was listening to these scholars. I really like to listen to scholars sometimes. And one particular conversation between three scholars I was listening to, and they were talking about the crisis of meaning that we're going through right now in the world, but especially in Western United States, and how people have gotten rid of religion, and they've been told by sort of liberal intellectuals that you can make your own meaning, that there is no inherent meaning, there's just meaning you make. And these are well-meaning intellectuals, and they're deeply steeped in philosophy and ethics and literature. And so, to some degree, the meaning they want to make is a beautiful world. It's a beautiful meaning. But they didn't realize Joe on the couch, if he gets to make his own meaning, it might look like the WWE. Right? Like when you're just told you just make your own meaning, well, that means different things to different people. And so they were talking about how this liberal trend, which was to free people from so-called dogmatic Christianity, it maybe even a good sort of impulse, because people get hurt by religion sometimes. So that might have been a good impulse. But they were talking about how they expected the Western intellectual tradition to be present enough in society that it would bind people to not eternal, but to deep-seated morality and a hunger for intellectual truth. And they were saying, boy, were we naive. Boy, were we naive to think that's what would happen. It did happen in pockets, of course. It's happening now. Secular world, atheist world, striving to be better. That is happening, of course. But it's Jerry Springer and the WWE for a whole bunch of people too. And it's not beautiful. And it is not good. And it isn't just another way of looking at the world. It's a wrong way. But now you can't tell people anything's wrong because we've fired any sort of means of saying, hey, there is wrong and right. We've gotten rid of it. So this is what they were discussing. They're discussing the crisis of meaning in the world. And I'm not going to talk about that at all. It's a side note they got onto where they were talking about the problem of scale in organizations. They weren't necessarily talking about religion. I think they were talking about corporations, but they were saying that it goes across all organizations, this problem of scale. I don't remember the numbers, but it's around 10,000 or 20,000 members, something. This notion that they've studied this. As organizations grow in size, they dogmatize, and religion does it, but everything does it. It turns out everything does it, and they begin to so it gets big enough that the system is the point, not the people it started to serve. Government can do this. Religion does this. Corporations cannibalize our environment and human beings for profits. They at a certain scale, the system loses sight of the individual. It loses sight of its purpose. This is what happens. It happens in anything that gets big, really. And then once it starts to lose sight of its purpose, there's a certain personality type that's sort of, they're a good, they're in the Enneagram, I think they would be one of the actual legit personality types, but they're really, really rule-based people. They're very rule-based. They're very black and white, right and wrong, dot all your I's and cross all your T's. We sure want those people in the world, but when systems get to a certain scale, they start to only promote and hire and put into leadership positions those kinds of people. Because they don't make waves, they don't rock the boat, they're not radical prophetic types that are going to shake things up, they're not mystical types, they're not artistic, they're not worried about, hey, you're messing with my creativity. They like that everyone dresses the same, they like that everyone thinks the same, that's their thing. And in a mix, in the leaven, those kind of people are good people. We need them. I rely on those people in band. I rely on I was thinking Raya's not here and you sure know it because it's like 3 things that didn't get done. Raya does them. You're so glad they're in the mix. They're like a gift. Thank God they're there. But you don't want all of them all in charge. And that happens in religion. So now we get this beautiful message of Jesus, fall in love with everything so profoundly that you're blissed out. And someone that doesn't get it might think you're on drugs, right? Like at Pentecost, are you guys drunk? What are you on? That's what they're asking them. You got this radical Christianity, mystical, and it's if you read the early expressions, they're experimenting with what it means to be in Christ, and they do all these fantastically crazy things, and it's neat. It's a melting pot of ideas. And then, at a certain scale, the bean counters take over. And you're damn glad they're there, man, when it's a bunch of artists sitting around trying to get the bills paid. Like, you want them. But you don't want them only always in charge. But that's what happens in organized religion. That's what happens in corporations. So now, this beautiful message that is multifaceted becomes about right and wrong, do it this way, don't do it this way, this is good, this is bad, and it becomes legalized, corporatized, and dogmatized. To the point where this tree scares somebody. Somebody's scared of this tree. To the point where you're spending 3 hours a day in prayer, but you missed Mass, so now you're in trouble. You missed Mass, it's a big, big deal. To the point where someone who's never entered the 2nd stage of prayer is lecturing someone who's sitting in the 6th stage of prayer on what religion is. And that's how it goes bad. And then that becomes a culture that reinforces itself. And maybe there's a problem priest or preacher every now and then that's just a pain in everyone's butt. That was the guy who taught me theology. A rebel priest, always in trouble, always on fire, actually. Really, like real Christ fire coming out of him, prophetic fire. But, stuck out in West Jordan, stuck out there. And also bad reputation, spoken of poorly behind his back. Everyone making sure you don't really listen to that guy. They're best. They're best. The best one with the worst reputation. Because too many of a certain type are running it. And then that's all you hear. So the Bible's told you. My daughter said in school, she's Catholic school. She said, Dad, she said, it's as if they're intentionally trying to make people leave Catholicism. She said, everything they teach you could not teach it in a worse way. She said, especially if you're not Catholic, she said, 40% of people that go to Catholic school are not Catholic. It's just good school. The education is good. She said, it's as if they're trying to make sure none of those people will ever become Christian. Because it's like you're reading a legal document, she said. It's soulless and dead. She said, if you tell me, she would come home with the lesson and say, this was so terrible. And I would go, oh no, that's a beautiful. And I would tell her what it really means. And she'd say, Dad, the way you say it, it's so wonderful. The way they say it, I hate that I'm there. Okay, so this book, I was going to go into some old literature, but I thought, let's don't. A further problem that developed in Christianity is with Luther. So Luther comes along. He doesn't like the first of all that the Catholic Church is at that time in history where he was corrupt. So he's mad that it's corrupt. He's right to be mad. But also he decides that his way of interpreting the Bible, right? Here's one more number. I don't know what number he is out of the 9 personality types, but one more number walks in and says, hey man, I plug into Christianity this way. This must be what it really means. So he's just, again, one personality type sees religion a certain way, and he says, let's throw out all the extra biblical literature that told us what the scriptures mean, and we'll reinterpret it according to my view. So he's a heretic. That's what he is. He's a heretic. And he doesn't really want to start a new religion. He just wants to convince Catholicism that they're wrong, but he's wrong, but he's right about the corruption, so it's messy. Here's the point. He throws out all the extra biblical literature. He throws out the first 300 years of literature by people that are levitating and working miracles and not needing to eat and being visited by angels and don't need to sleep at all at night because all they have is blinding white light all night from God. They're going further than people who die in near-death experiences and then come back and tell the world God is real. They're going further than that every night in prayer, and they're writing literature. And we have it. And he throws it out. And he invents this teaching, sola scriptura. You can only use the scriptures to interpret the scriptures. You can't refer to any extra biblical literature. That, in the Protestant world, has a devastating effect. Because now you come in with your modern eyes, you read the Sermon on the Mount, you read the Beatitudes, and no one tells you, hey, just so you know, that was Jesus giving the summary of all the stages of spiritual growth. But come talk to us about, like, if you're in poverty of spirit, come talk to us. There's a lot of understanding you need to navigate that stage. That's gone. That's utterly lost and completely forgotten. Now it's just, the Beatitudes, just be poor in spirit, be humble. Great. I mean, great. But they don't know. They don't know that it is Jesus' summation of his entire teaching. And they don't know that they're being taught. Don't you ever wonder, if you can become a saint, what are the stages? They don't know. We know the stages. Because the extra biblical literature that surrounded scripture was thrown out. So then you don't even know what you're reading. You don't even know what you're reading. And it's up to you, like me, rebel hippie Clint, to just read the Beatitudes and figure it out. I'm not going to figure it out. One personality type and a mess. I'm not going to get it. It's not going to happen. You have to have that extra biblical literature. So that got thrown out. So then that created, in the Protestant world, a genuine lack of spiritual growth. A genuine lack of spiritual growth. At least in Catholicism or the Orthodox Church, if you look, you will find it. You will find a contemplative priest, you will find a monk or a nun, and you will find a group that is spending 2 or 3 hours a day in prayer and meditation, going deep spiritually. You will find that. You won't find that in a large sect of the Protestant world because they threw it all away. It's just gone and lost. We still have the literature, but they don't use it. So then that's the present state of Christianity. Either they don't have any knowledge that it's a spiritual path at all, or they know but don't care and they're just like, we're Irish Catholics, or I don't know, I'm just making that up, whatever. I'm a Catholic, so therefore, I'm cool or neat or something. So then the spirituality is lost. Okay, so then here's Vladimir Lasky talking about, I'm loosely using his words, but he's basically talking about the dogmatic side of the church, that if you don't cross when you sit down, they get on your case, even if you were totally in a holy state when you forgot. Like they can't parse out what is sin and what isn't. Someone watched porn one night. I know we don't watch porn, but I'm just saying someone does one night. They shouldn't, but they do. And they just go nuts about it to the point where the person doesn't even feel safe in their own parish or church. And it's absolutely possible that that person's halfway to union with God and they just slipped up, and none of that's taken into account. It's just black and white, man. Black and white. Those bean counters in charge just coming down, man. Not seeing a bigger picture. So here's Lasky talking about that. Thus, the mystics are set up against the theologians. The contemplatives, that's the meditators, you guys, against the prelates. The saints against the church. He's talking about a position where the people that are holy are at odds with the church that should be producing them and is. But then he talks about the mystical theology of the Eastern Church. He says the Eastern tradition has never made a sharp distinction between mysticism and theology, between personal experience and the divine mysteries and the dogmas affirmed by the church. Instead of assimilating the mystery to our mode of understanding, that means instead of reading the Bible and saying it means what I think it means, he said instead of doing that, we should, on the contrary, look for a profound change, an inner transformation of spirit, enabling us to experience it mystically. Do you know what that means? It doesn't mean you argue about the exact, tiny details of the Trinity. He's saying to put that away. You're supposed to be undergoing a change that lets you experience the Trinity directly. That's the point of religion. That's the point. Theology and mysticism support and complete each other. There is, therefore, no Christian mysticism without theology, but above all, there is no theology without mysticism. Mysticism is accordingly treated in the present work as the perfecting crown of all theology, as theology par excellence. Unlike Gnosticism, in which knowledge for its own sake constitutes the aim of the Gnostic, Christian mysticism is always in the last resort a means, a unity of knowledge subserving an end which transcends all knowledge. And that end is union with God, or deification. This is not a fringe book. If you tell a monk from the Orthodox Church you're reading this, they'll tell you you're in good hands. I could barely see it because I don't have my glasses. I'm trying my best to read it. If you throw them to me, or bring them, yeah. Thanks, Jill. That's Jill the White. She loves if I say that publicly. It's her very favorite, right? To be called Jill the White in front of people. Okay. Mystical contemplation, right? What is that? Don't make it bigger than you. It's when your head gets real quiet and you experience the holiness of God to some degree or another. Every one of you knows what that is. Every one of you knows what that is. Mystical contemplation to attain it. It is necessary to renounce both sense and all the workings of reason. Everything which may be known by the senses or the understanding, both that which is and all that is not, in order to be able to attain in perfect ignorance to union with Him who transcends all being and all knowledge. The way of ascent, in the course of which we are gradually delivered from the hold of all that can be known, is compared by Dionysius to Moses' ascent of Mount Sinai to meet with God. And I'm going to read this, but listen to this. Here's another thing. The ascent of Moses on Mount Sinai, okay? It happened, I guess. But the way that the church fathers use it, the way the saints used it, is as another map of the stages that are required to go through to union with God. Yes, it's a dogma, but the dogma has deeper meaning than you think until you read extra biblical literature. So here he goes, man. This is one of my favorite sections of this whole book. The way of ascent, in the course of which we are gradually delivered from the hold of all that can be known, is compared by Dionysius to Moses' ascent of Mount Sinai to meet with God. Moses begins by purifying himself. Then he separates himself from all that is unclean. It is then that he hears the many notes of the trumpets. He sees the many lights which flash forth many pure rays. Then he is separated from the many, and with the chosen priests he reaches the height of the divine ascents. Even here he does not associate with God. He does not contemplate God, for God is unseen. But the place where he is, I think this means that the highest and most divine of the things which are seen and understood are a kind of hypothetical account of what is subject to him who is over all. He's just saying all the fancy stuff that happens on the way into union to some people. He's, visions, and, some of us have that stuff. The lights, my friend last night just had a white light. He said, I thought someone turned on the light in the room while I was praying, and it wasn't true. He was starting to see the light of God. My friend Scotty, you guys know Scotty. That happened to him last night. So he's having this, but he's seeing these lights. But what Vladimir is saying is that's just like a hypothetical account of what God really is. And they get all this from the book of from Moses' ascent. It's so neat. Through these lights and mini revelations, through these things we experience, through them is revealed the presence of him who is above all thought, a presence which occupies the intelligible heights of his holy places. It is then that Moses is freed from the things that see and that are seen. He passes into the truly mystical darkness of ignorance, where he shuts his eyes to all scientific apprehensions and reaches what is entirely untouched and unseen, belonging not to himself and not to another, but wholly to God who is above all. He is united to the best of his powers with the unknowing power of all knowledge, And by that very unknowing, he knows what surpasses understanding. You could see how getting caught in arguing about every particular scripture could get in the way of that. You could see how turning the rules that help you, like don't cheat on your wife or husband, basic, really good things that make a wreck of your life so you can't have any peace to find God. You could see how those rules that are meant to free us, if they're made the end, right? You could see how that just kills all spiritual growth. You could see how even the words in the holy book, if they are clung to as ideas instead of as descriptions to something you're actually supposed to go to, you could see how the very words themselves could be a prison to stop you from ever going. You can see how the love of religion is idolatry, when it's supposed to be, the religion is supposed to be pointing to the thing itself, and you're supposed to go to the thing itself. So then love of religion is idolatry. And then some poor kid, some poor souls raised up in whatever tradition it is, and they're kind of, they're not like saints, because they might kill you if they get mad, if they were big enough to. But they're also super sweet and delicious and wonderful and kind of living in Smurfland a lot. And you could see how all those rules could just suppress and kill that beautiful spirit that's growing in them, that's already there from God. You could see how that could ruin it completely. So you get to the Sermon on the Mount, that's Jesus' summation of the whole way into union with God. Just wherever you come from, if you're a murderous villain and you come and say, man, I got to change, or you're a drug addict living on the streets, man, I got to change, you've hit rock bottom, or you're, the head of a CEO company and you realized you've been stepping on necks the whole time to get there and what you do is evil. Whatever, wherever you're coming from. The way, right? So I want to change. I want to know the way. What's the way? Jesus left his summary. That's the Sermon on the Mount. That's the Sermon on the Mount. So he says, blessed are the poor in spirit. Blessed are the poor in spirit. And people that know the way surround you and say, yeah, that's the stage you're in. But it's more than just that you're sorry now in this moment. There's a profound humility that has to be gained. They tell you, I know you pray, but without a deep poverty of spirit, you can't pray very sincerely because you don't need God. They tell you, they say, hey man, this poverty of spirit thing is pretty deep. And the more you know you need God, the more sincere your prayer. And God doesn't answer words, God answers sincerity. So when you reach out to God and you have true poverty of spirit, God hears you to that exact degree, or rather is able to give you what God is just dying to give you, to the exact degree of your need, which comes from your humility, your powerlessness. That's poverty of spirit. And then they say, and if you start to get that, man, then you're going to start to mourn. Blessed are those who mourn. You're going to get that little bit of God in your life, and you're going to look at the way you live now and the way you've lived and the way you are as a state of being, and you're going to start to mourn it. You're going to start to mourn the way you are. And it's a gift, and you're gonna feel like, what's going on? I used to think I was so neat, and now I'm not thinking I'm very neat. What is this? I don't know if this is light or dark. I don't know if this is good or bad. And they say, don't worry, Jesus told you this is the way. Mourn the way you are. Because you can't ask God to make you different if you're not sorry you are the way you are. You won't. And all God needs is for you to ask, so God can pour into you what God's always wanted to pour into you anyway. But God needs your permission. And each successive beatitude has that kind of understanding built into it. The way is known. We know the way. We know the way. And they say, you get that, and then you become, once you realize, okay, poverty of spirit, mourning the way you are, once you're really deep into that, meekness. You don't want to do anything without God ever again. You don't want to. You really deeply, deeply don't want to. You always want to be doing God's will. That's when you have meekness of spirit. And they say, and then when you get that, you'll start to hunger and thirst for God in a deep and profound way. And then they say you'll become pure of heart and you'll start to see God. Which happened to my friend Scotty last night. You know, he started to see, he got freaked out and came out of his prayer, but so he kind of, choked it, he kind of run it and choked it. but he was seeing God's light, and if he had been able to rest in that, he may very well have entered heaven. He's being touched by the divine light. You know, um, so what is Christianity? What this is the other thing, the crisis of meaning people were talking about. I'm spiritual but not religious. And they say, well, that's good if by religion you mean bean counting. That's really good. It's good you're spiritual and not religious if that's what religion means to you. It's good. Be that instead of that. You will get more out of life. But if by religion you mean an authentic path started by a master who knows the way to union with God and can show you, then it's better to be religious than spiritual. Because you're not left to reinvent the wheel and figure it all out on your own. Because someone has shown you the way into the fullness of union. And it's been passed on and proven to work in each generation. Then that's religion. That's religion.